All right, I think that's close enough. I'm still just copying this whole thing over in case I want to access it. But um, yes, if you were not here earlier, um, and talked about it a little bit yesterday too, but we are. This is mostly, yes, we're talking about the Death True recap movie, but because that recap movie is essentially contained within all of the Netflix versions of these episodes, there is not, strictly speaking, new stuff to talk about. So thank you. Um, uh, and so, if you have not watched the Netflix version, this has a couple of little things in it that were not in like the original broadcast that other people might have had from earlier. So it's useful in that respect. Um, those are no. Did I not get the transcoding this time? Oh, you're right. I didn't. Hold up. We'll change that. Gosh, we've had such luck with it. I didn't even look to see. Hold on one sec. Looks like. Okay, there we go. There we go. Um, yes, there are a few. So hang on, I'm going to be loading this up in the background while I talk to you. There are a few couple. There are a couple of things slightly different. One of the ones you are talking about is the Ray's smiling face. That it's we even talked about that. We went through that it's not totally clear. Um, is that just a really bad smile? Is it endearing? Is it someone who is not practiced at smiling? And they opted to try to clarify, I guess, for us. Um, I don't know if that was a good idea. Um, that's a little change. I'm pretty sure they drew more detail on Rei for the scene where Shinji's in her apartment. Oh, I did that wrong. Yes, there is um, yeah, the reflection of Kaoru in Rei's eyes when Naoka is choking the life out of her, which I'm kind of curious about that decision, honestly. Um, well, I just want this up so I can fetch stuff. I don't have time to mark it. Just getting it here was all the time took all the time I needed. There's also the very end, which this one I can actually fetch pretty quickly. Also at the very end, showing the let's do this. The angel statue at the very end. At least I don't remember it having the. I don't remember it having the blood stain, right? Like where Karu had lost his head moments before. The statue he'd been standing on now seems to be. Well, let me see if I can find that Karu. The thing it does tell the whole story kind of out of order. And one thing, one thing that is interesting about how they try to adapt it and speed things up, or not speed things up, but compress all the thoughts, was they would frequently have narration that came from some other scene play over the scene we were seeing um, in that moment originally, and one and some of those narrations come from episodes 25 and 26. Now, even though the this recap movie ends apparently before the events of 25 and 26, um, some of that narration is then brought in to some of that narration is brought in to lay over the top, right? uh, like Misato's whole bit about being a good girl and then wanting to feel and needs to do this, but for her father, but she hates her father. Um, and so that comes from the instrumentality later on, but it's played across that as a scene. There's a couple other ones. Uh, like like Asuka's scene of finding her mother for sure. But yeah, some of the things they didn't change. They didn't change the long elevator scene. They didn't change the length of the awkward Shinji's on top of Rei in her bedroom scene. And they left the decisive moment of holding Karu in his hand and thinking about it. Um, so they left the long scenes that make us feel tense or uncomfortable. They kind of pretty much left that in. Um, so yeah, the key scenes. Um, I think the end one is exactly right. Like the elevator, yeah, the elevator is slightly shorter. Um, but the effect still, like they could have, if they had originally just wanted it to be short scenes, that was an opportunity to do it, right? Especially in a recap when you were trying to get so much in a short period of time. So yeah, the fact that they, but yeah, no, the elevator scene is like, I think they cut off part of the beginning. I didn't time it at the moment, but I don't think I can actually come up with it. One thing they do for the Netflix version anyway is that the thing is overscanned, right? They took the original 4:3 and kind of brought it closer so it would fit into a 16:9 container. That often actually cuts off uh, some of the picture. Some things are a lot closer than they would have been otherwise. Um, but other than the order, the kind of main difference is the framing device of the quartet, right? Of each of them coming in and playing a different instrument in this quartet. And it's, our three Eva pilots we're used to, plus Karu. And I think it's interesting the order in which they get there, where Shinji shows up way before he needs to be. Um, but thank you. Thank you, Sleep Spot. Um, where Shinji shows up way earlier than necessary and is practicing before he even gets there and has that confidence thing. And then Asuka will show up probably knowing that Shinji is there alone, and so it's just them for a minute. Rei shows up in time to tune, basically, and then Kaoru literally shows up perfectly on the moment when it's on time. So that's kind of a to create this new. It's not even really a framing device, but this structure to it. It was interesting to put a little bit of their personality in the how they showed up for it. Um, and yeah, there's a couple things you kind of miss with the way it cuts together, but cutting a few things off. But in general, I don't know. I don't know if that's actually. Yeah, there are some scenes where it's like you lose the sense of scale from having cropped things closer. Um, I don't have a great example of that necessarily, but unfortunately, because it's so out of order, I have trouble finding things now. I was going to find a good thing. Anyway, oh yeah, I was kind of looking for the reflection of Karu, but I don't remember where that is in here now. I haven't just watched it. What I do find interesting is the things they kept versus what they disposed of, right? Yeah, some things shrinking down, you definitely lose the sense of scale. I was mentioning there at the end, the fight with Karu and Unit 1 versus Unit 2. I'll find an example here. I was hoping I could jump around and find that example of the eyes. Yeah, like this, where they cut off. Since you can't see the background extend beyond them, you don't, or how far down they go. It seems like he seems much larger than he should be by comparison because he's closer to the foreground, right? I don't know, lots of little things like that. But I do find it interesting how they use some of the 25 and 26 narration over some of those parts, and it really changes the changes how you would have experienced that scene if that was the first way you watched it, right? So I don't know why necessarily the overscan. There is one moment of, I don't know if it's intentional humor or not, but it's pretty great where I'm not gonna be able to find it. Sorry, I couldn't both transfer it to this computer and come here on time. So um, so we start talking about Ray. Where are you, Ray? Yeah, sometimes even like the kanji that are the title cards don't even all fit all the way on the screen. There's the elevator scene. It's like this is my own curiosity now. 45 seconds. No, it's almost exactly the same. Anyway, there's a little bit of an unintentional comedy there when they replay the escalator scene and Ray gets upset at him. Um, sorry, it's just I laughed watching it. I shouldn't have, but it's the wonder of editing here, where she's upset about him. She's upset at him for what she's saying about Gendo, and she'll go to slap him, and it cuts immediately to him waking up in the hospital from a different scene. Like she slapped him so hard he ended up in the hospital from it, and she's there to like finish the job, you know. Um, I can't help but feel like the editor was having some fun, but yeah, right. Like what we didn't see was him falling down that escalator for like the next 30 minutes, right? Um, anyway, no background music. Oh, I just actually didn't turn it on. There usually has background music. There you go. Um, anyway, I don't know if I'll keep looking for it while we talk, because definitely the reflection in Ray's eyes is interesting. Um, but nothing. If you watch the Netflix versions of some of these things, there is, I think everything is contained. Like seeing Lilith's legs extend down when they pull the Spear of Longinus out of her. It was included in the original. I think that showed up for the first time in Rebirth. I remember that one, or in Death. Um, here is the. There we go. Here is the change to the smile. And, oh, I went back too far. So we'll just look at that for a second. I mean, you can even tell it's like her hair has way more detail than normal. So Okay. Yeah, other than the quartet, which we talked about. Yeah, I mean you can just tell like the hair detail if nothing else, and it's such a specific moment to try to clarify. Um, and so I don't think they even did it through the whole scene, did they? Oh, let's get too far. Yeah, I mean even there's less like highlights and shadows. Um, anyway, well, I was hoping to find where she gets choked to death, but now I've forgotten where it is relative to everything else. So, we do like. Oh, I found it. Haha. There we go. And outside of the quartet, um, so we have our choking ray one, and there you go. There's your little. Briefly, you see Karu in her eyes, and then a brief flash of it, and then a much closer version. So just in case the part where she busts into his containment field with her own AT field at the end wasn't enough to tell you that the two of them are very similar. That's that's making it even more clear. Um, Especially like the orientation of it, because she's being choked and leaning backwards, and his face is upside down to her, so it's almost like he is watching it happen, like standing up behind her, watching it happen. Um, yeah, so but yeah, the order of the scenes, yeah, that's the main thing. Like telling it completely out of order and trying to group several scenes together with the characters to help you tie things together. Um, and it skips through some of the angels too. Like we never see um, the shadow one. We never see the giant one, the big eye that falls out of the sky. I don't know why I can't keep them straight in my head, but um, yeah. But I can see it, like the idea that Karu was watching all this, but in her eyes, especially, and it emphasizes the red of his eyes in the red of her eyes. So once again, I think just making sure um, the two are similar, and just needing to clarify that further, apparently. So, yeah, it makes sense as if you haven't seen 1 through 26, it wouldn't make any sense at all. It is really just um, I haven't seen Evangelion in a minute. I want to watch End of Evangelion. Let me catch up and remind myself. I'm not sure that's actually effective because you don't get a lot of. You forget some of you can forget the order of character crisis the way that was presented, right? Um, that I don't know. Don't remember that. But I feel like because they changed the order of it, you don't. Even if you're using that as a refresher, I feel like you would lose the thread of how the characters got to where they end up at the end of 24, right? Like Asuka, they kind of start with her in the bathtub and distressed, right? That's like the first part of her scene on this. So I don't know. It certainly would remind you of several things, and you would hope your memory would fill it in. But I think even if you've seen this before, this wouldn't be enough to get you. I can just watch just this and then End of Evangelion. So anyway, think that's about the extent of this. It is cool. If I was recommending the show to someone, would you tell them to skip this? If they watch the extended versions 1 through 26, yes. Oh, sorry, I just missed that. For Flying Simian, then yes. I think if you're rolling through, you could skip right over this. Flying Simian, I couldn't watch most of the streams. I'm especially sad that I missed the Cotter episodes. That was a mess. Glad you're still going on it. Great for the insights. Still love it. Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I had noticed your absence, but I'm glad you're here now. I'm sorry this is not much of a discussion one. This one it'll be mostly tomorrow. Keeping this short today because of getting ready for tomorrow is probably more important. Will I be doing the rebuild movies? Only if they finish. Only if they put out the fourth one. That is taking 25, 26, and then Death and Rebirth and End of Evangelion all together. I feel like you're asking for it if you don't think the ending can shake things up, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, man. Tomorrow's it was this morning we talked about 25 and 26, well, this afternoon, but earlier today, depending, we talked about 25, 26, and that was half philosophical musing, half actual analysis, and then tomorrow will be End of Evangelion. But what this little period here, right here, is just make sure people are on the same page. It's more like if there's anything in the series up till now that you missed or want more clarification on or forgot about, or you missed us going through, or you just were trying to rewatch and skip some things and you forgot, this is kind of like the very brief chance to get us all back on the same page before we get to the End of Evangelion. I'm sorry that timing's not perfect for you. I mean, the Alps are nice. The Alps are probably a better use of your day, I'll be honest. I guess it depends where you're going, but I assume so. If you're going to the beautiful Alps. The angel's female that he stands on. But the angels' names, yeah, I've waited to talk about that, and then as we got here to the end, I realized I didn't pick a good place to talk about that, because they don't have a place to talk about in 25, 26. This is ending up being more of a, told people earlier that this might be the optional way to, this stream right now is more like, if you're caught up, especially if you've watched the Netflix ones, when there's probably nothing new necessarily, and so considering the amount of time that's gone into these streams so far, that like this would be a good one to take the night off. So I didn't want to talk about it here, but since I told people to skip this one, basically, spare a thought for me hiking the Alps, please do. My good friend of mine and her husband are on their way to Alaska at the very moment to do this very same thing. So it's just me here, not having an adventure, living vicariously through anime characters and their adventures. Yeah, I thought about talking about End of Evangelion, and it makes me wonder. There's so much to talk about already. So I kind of realized, I got down to the end, I was like, oh, we'll talk about this later, or we can talk about all of them. I realized there's not actually a really good place to talk about it. And it is kind of interesting, you know? Yeah, I can imagine if you live in Europe, the Alps would be quite the relief right now to get out of the heat. Yeah, the escape from things. I think there's a value to that in storytelling anyway. What's that about the female angel? Sorry, I'm trying to see what the Okay, someone mentioned the one he's standing on as a. Let me see if I can find that. Hold on. This is so. This is such a terrible way to do this. To just search blindly. Right, here we go. So not the same, I take it. What is a bosom of? Yeah, like yeah, boobs. It's a female. Opie. So not that image, I guess, but the one at the end, or the one he stands on when he's talking to Zila. That one, because that's not in the recap movie. During the end credits, that one. Okay. All right, so there, yeah, yeah, for sure. And that one, honestly, like, looks way more like a Ava, doesn't it? And saying it incorrectly to two. Let's not skip over that. Um, yeah, it's very. This is not a very angelic angel, isn't it? I mean, it really looking at this, um, and this other version too, um, and the way it looks like an Evangelion with wings sprouting out. Doesn't that kind of immediately make you think of the second impact of the wings coming out? That's something not only do we see, but we hear them talking about. The wings are about to reach the surface. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure the first version of the angel did not look that way. Let's see if I can find that. It's not the same kind of wings, but we might as well look. I mean, I do like the way it introduces by like pretty much using exactly the same footage that we saw from the security, and then rolling that right into Misato being rescued. Like I said, I mean, I actually get the full message here in my little notifications thing. Yeah, I know that the thing that pops up on screen truncates it, but I can see the whole thing. So yeah, I appreciate it. Uh, I really do. But yeah, that's something to do with the. Oh, okay. Oh, that's okay. So for a second there, I thought you didn't get it, but oh, you're just warning me about the refute. Okay. I was distracted by the music during that part. So um, yeah, it's just truncated on the alert boxes. Anyway, the Ava with wings kind of makes me think of this little opening bit, isn't it? And I'm pretty sure that is actually different than the. Isn't that different than the way it was in? I'm pretty sure that's different. That's a different animation than the first time we see Misato's memory. Yeah, I mean, what the wings look like. That's, um, hold on. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are very different than the ones from her memory. It even looks more like more detail. There's more detail in the clouds and the shadows and all that. Um, hold on, I need to get to a different. Would look like this. I might have cut it off though. Yeah, that's a bad example. look an awful lot like these wings, right? I mean, it's buried there in the opening, but it's actually one of the things you can't fail but miss since such a fast since most of the images are so fast and that one's slow. Those are definitely the same form of images. Oh, about the messages being deleted. So if the bot catches something like too many symbols, I actually turned off the too many caps thing. We don't seem to have had a problem with it since either. Um, the the bot will automatically delete messages like links that aren't approved, too many symbols, too many emojis. I have set it up that way. And what it caught you for was symbols. I don't know what. I don't know what it was. If you um, and it's just automatic. I don't even know what you did. But unfortunately, the way Twitch works is if you delete a message, it goes back and deletes all the messages from that session, which is terrible. Basically, I mean, but I can't control it. You delete all, delete none, and it's just how the bot works. And so whatever you typed broke the whatever the symbol limit is. So, but don't worry. I mean, we saw all he had. The other bot actually records everything, all the chat, so I can always find people. So that kind of thing doesn't eliminate something someone said. So if someone's trying to tell me something, I won't lose it forever. The other bot will hold on to things. So, um, but yeah, it's a Twitch limitation. I wish it didn't work that way. Um, it was disappointing to learn, honestly. But anyway, I don't know if they changed the wings for death to make it more obvious that that's how they're supposed to look. But so the other scene's redrawn too. Yeah, I couldn't tell exactly. I mean, definitely that one shot they went for the money, but I feel like when she's looking at him, no, you're fine. I feel like when she's looking at him, it seemed kind of like the old. Seems a lot like the old version of the scene, right? Like, that's way too far. I don't know, actually. I mean, I can see them. Um, I think even the Avas bending over or seem more detailed than I recall. Is that my imagination? They don't seem nearly cropped like a lot of things. But some of it seems reminds me a lot of the old one, like or the like. I'll agree that that looks more detailed, but I feel like um, that especially, yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting to what they cared about. Her smiling was the most obvious one because her smile is so different. But that's the kind of thing we would do if we had like time to really pull it apart. um, anyway, other than these little things, which again, the way they cut it together, it could be this could be an interesting topic in its own right. Like, why these scenes? Why not? Why include these angels and not the other? Right? Some make a lot of sense, like including the first angel, including the one where Ray, you know, seems like she's going to sacrifice herself, including the one where even one goes berserk and tries to eat the angel. Obviously, those make sense to conclude. Um, or when Asuka is introduced, um, it just kind of you watch the recap movie, and outside of Kaoru, the angels just seem like a background thing, right? They just don't seem that important if you just watch the recap. Anyway, like I said, I was going to keep this short. So the main thing, even if you don't normally pipe up, was there anything during um, during the run, so getting ready for End of Evangelion, was there anything that we've seen at this point that you still have a question about, something that didn't make sense, or something we just overlooked, or something that maybe is more significant in retrospect that just hasn't come up otherwise? I mean, yeah, efficiently, and if you're familiar with the show, it does hit a lot of the points. And one of the ways it does that is by taking narration from one part of it and playing it over at different scenes. So you're actually being reminded of two different moments at the same time. But sometimes those don't make as much sense if it was like your first impression. Yeah, changes to facial expression are always kind of a contentious thing, but if the realities of production resulted in them not telling the story they wanted to the first time, I understand. You know, uh, I've seen other shows where they do that. So like Studio Shaft is kind of famous for releasing different versions to Blu-ray than just going back and filling the background with more detail and all these kind of things. Yeah, like someone saying the exact same moment. That's what Shaft, which is a funny thing Shaft does, because it was obviously um, like their stuff's pretty well received as it is. It just makes me think that these guys really, really want to tell the story they want. They really want to fill in. Even before Shaft had all the breakout hits there, they put so much. I almost want to say unnecessary detail into their stuff. Talk about the religious symbolism being pointless. So, in the all spoilers discussion, it's something I've talked about. But I actually find, I mean, to me, it connects together into an interesting way to look at the story as a whole. So, that is actually something I'll talk about tomorrow. Like, I'll hear, because I know there's some people here who haven't seen End of Evangelion. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's just the demands of a production schedule. Um, but it's interesting for in Shaft's case how much. Yeah, that's why I'm not talking about it yet. Like how to think of this in general. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like production realities. It's why even though I had that whole death of the author rant, what seems like a lifetime ago, but earlier in the week, one of the situations in which I'm a little more tolerant for it is when you have a collaborative effort because the art director has one idea of the story in their head, and the director has an idea, and multiple writers, multiple directors might have different ideas of how exactly to interpret a particular scene, particular nuance, how a voice actress or actor should inflect at that moment. Well, I'm not trying to countermand it. I'm building off of it that I'm more um, tolerant of that when it's a collaborative effort because it wasn't a single artist, that each of them essentially had their part of it, and that's their part of the art that maybe they should stay out of, but the final art piece, no one is actually the one that created everything, right? Language interface thing, yeah. Anything that knocks you out of immersion is risky, right? Yeah, so we'll be able to talk about like religious iconography is something I've touched on a bit in the all spoiler discussions. Um, Thank you. I agree with the people in chat doing their best to explain things, and I know how hard it is to do that without giving stuff away. I mean, imagine right now where you've known 1 through 26, and people are talking about how odd Ray is acting, or trying to figure out what makes Gendo tick, and not be able to say, it's complicated. All these things. I mean, now you look back and it's like, gosh, how would you answer that question? Um, and so it's a talking about the Blu-ray changes being again, production schedule um, makes a difference, and sometimes I guess there's some pride in that, but definitely like little things like the Shaft example. The reason I'm reaching for that is because a lot of what Shaft does for their Blu-ray releases is like fill the background with more things. In such a way that's hard to believe it was planned that way for the original broadcast, you know? So what is Evangelion about? A lot. Not one answer for sure, but yeah, I see what you're saying. I said this earlier in the week, but like you're an absolute death of the author defender. Pretty much me too. I mean, like the collaborative thing is where I understand, but I would still rather you shut up about it. And it's because of to me, how important the individual interpretation is. Um, but to answer the question, how would you answer that, or how would you give an answer to that? That's actually the thing I gained from doing this the most. And I think I gain more than probably anyone. Is trying to figure out how to try to explain something as best you can, or to put your own into it. That is how you learn the most. Learning how to teach something. Not that I'm teaching, but that same idea. You'll, by necessity, immerse yourself into it more than you might have. You can't give it just a casual glance, because once you're trying to explain it to a perspective outside of your own, to 25, 26, suddenly irrelevant, you have to try to imagine what the other person understands. Like, if I didn't have my own perspective and assumptions, how would I make someone else arrive at the same conclusion, right? So yes, death of the author, also in fictional work. Yeah, so I also believe in the separation between art and artist. So I'm actually not big on like psychoanalyzing. While at the same time we're admitting that a perfect separation is impossible. Like Tolkien and his experiences in World War I. People always try to make a direct leap from his experiences then to Middle Earth and things that happen like in Lord of the Rings. And it's something he always tried to argue against, or rejected, but people do it anyway. And so I think both answers are true. Yes, he wasn't trying to literally write an allegory of World War I, and he has a fantastic diatribe on this, where the idea of applicability versus allegory even comes from. At the same time, you can't ignore the fact that living through that probably changes how you saw the world, right? But I like to try to separate the two. I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So if there's an artist that I don't like, that can be quite separate from their art, right? And that's hard for some people to do, especially if like an artist acts in a way they disagree with strongly. So sorry, I'm reading on the summary things here. Exactly. How do you wrap this up? I like the summarize a movie badly, or summarize. You'll see anime versions of that. I always enjoy trying to throw in my own takes. Like, how could I summarize this in a way that someone could recognize it, but really doesn't summarize it at all. Yeah, and like you were saying, like how's the "don't meet your heroes," right? That's the saying. You got to realize that kind of a fundamental part of art is it's created by artists. I'll talk about this one day. I have several scripts that I work on. I'm like, one day this will actually be a video. Um, but one of the examples I like to reach for is the maker's mark. What I'm talking about? The intentional defect in something that's handmade to prove that it was not made by a machine, to prove and the way you prove that it was made by a human is to introduce a flaw. Um, I think art, flawed beings created it for other flawed beings, to speak in a kind of unnecessarily grandiose way. And so there's no artist who you couldn't just like there's no work you couldn't find things to complain about or hate on or criticize it for. There's no artist will escape that scrutiny either. So I don't know. I'm not sure you gain anything from that process. Separating the artist might be inappropriate. Well, okay, so two different things. So let's take something like, I forget how you pronounce it, Polyon, whatever, the autobiography. It's a French word. It means butterfly. I think it's French. Where he writes this kind of tour de force of his life. Like as an autobiography, it reads like a freaking adventure book. But obviously his experience and as both the speaker and the writer are fairly inseparable. But the work itself, you wouldn't separate out and say this weren't his experiences, but the work itself, the things he chose to talk about and the way in which he chose to talk about it, that is him as the artist. And so if he's being disingenuine, like if you knew him personally, that's a separate thing from the actual work he created, if that makes sense. Yeah, what does it mean? It's actually kind of even trying to get a pat answer on that perhaps suggests that you're still looking for just a surface reading, right? How would I sum up the message of 25, 26 regarding self-worth? Ooh, see, just like that. Like, it's a multi-part answer, really. I mean, I think there's some obvious patterns to the response that it must fundamentally come from within, but it can't come entirely from within. That your experience with others is how you connect, and the versions of them that live in you help make up who you are, but ultimately you're the one who gets to choose what that reality looks like, your truth, right? And so it can only come from you, but interacting with others, learning about others, trying to connect to others and understand others helps you form the boundary of who you are. And so at the end, when Shinji decides to, there's another version of me can exist. I feel like the final call to action there is who you are now is not who you will be forever. But the only person that can change you from who you are now into someone else is you. So that was as short as I could think I could make that. The way we interpret speaks a lot about this. Okay, so to go back, just with Death of the Author thing again. So we're at the hour mark, so we're not going to go much longer, just FYI. I mean at this time, you guys. You can make the argument that authors don't know what they're doing, and we can put any meaning in their work that we find convenient to us. Yes, actually, because I think all interpretations are individual, because absolutely no one else has your chain of experiences and how you reacted to those experiences and how that forms your perspective. The world to each soul is particular and private to that soul. I think I'm butchering that, but it's something like that. How can a piece of work have just one meaning? Yeah, exactly. One thing as you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Um, End of Evangelion's a lot. I have to be. I felt so unprepared basically every single day. Oddly, except for today, after being sick and then having to steel myself to do it, I was just distracted from that. Um, so yes, a lot of the joy of interpreting. I'm way behind, but I'm just reading what you're saying. And analyzing works less about the work and more about finding new facets of yourself through it. So yeah, I think one of the reasons I reject the idea of an objective analysis is because we don't all have the same experience. There is no agreed upon standard, right? That this much plot to character ratio equals good, and beyond that equals bad. Okay, it's not science. It's not reducible. It's not quantifiable. Which means all of us have subjective opinions. There are agreed upon trends. There are things we notice are more effective at communicating a theme or making a character seem believable to the audience or holding their attention in pace. So we tend to treat those as objective things you should do. But there still isn't any. There's no. There's no governing body for this, right? There's no agreed upon consensus judgment to apply to a work of art. And for me, and other people have different interpretations of art, but for me, that is what makes it art instead of something else, is that it can't be reduced. I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to spend the rest of the night looking at End of Evangelion. I think as long as you make a good argument for interpretation, it's a hard thing to say that's wrong. I say this several times, but to me, there is only having opinions and justifying those opinions. The opinions you have are pretty particular to you, right? How well you can justify that or back up that opinion. You have to convert someone necessarily, but to me, that's it. Those are the two things. Um, So yeah, that's why I'm personally don't think even the author of a work knows everything it's about. And quite aside from philosophical reasons for this, the alter ego is like a volunteer part-time editor for a lot of aspiring writers, and not as many now as it used to be. But you would be shocked at the things people write into their work that they don't realize. Things that they would prefer not to know about themselves, right? Things that they would give away, like to go far enough back to put me back in college. This is a really distinct memory. We had a creative writing course, and that's one of those courses that attracts people who are not necessarily arts and sciences people, like that aren't lit majors or English majors or art majors or whatever. And so you would attract people from all over. Lots of people love the idea of trying their hand at writing. And so we had this girl who had no training in this, basically. And she would write poetry. And the way that worked, and it's something I've been fortunate enough to use in all the writing circles I've been in since, is single person presents a work, everyone else analyzes it, and you have a discussion. You all analyze it independent of each other, and you all get together to discuss it, right? And this is not just my interpretation, but also trying to advise them. And this girl wrote this poetry, and everyone had the same response, that she's so angry, and her anger is unfocused and it's all over the place. And she didn't believe this. She didn't see that. She rejected what we were getting out of what she was saying. But we all independently came to that same thing, that she was pouring this unfocused anger into her writing. And that was, she left the class. Like, she did again, basically in the same conclusion. And she dropped. She couldn't face or accept maybe us, but she could not accept that, or maybe, I don't know. I mean, not like I sat her down and asked her, but she was putting more of herself into her work than she realized, and I think all artists probably do that. So, that's just kind of what makes it, or yeah, part-time editor, like for funsies. Like, it's been a long time since someone's paid me for that. So, yeah, I mean, and what we're doing here. If you're here, why, unless you're just popping in for a moment, like pulling this stuff apart must be interesting to you, right? Um, and so I think it's interesting. I think I would warn someone against letting prevailing interpretations or widely accepted thing or just your very first take on it be the end of the conversation, because only you know what it meant to you. I mean, there's moments. Um, yeah, I'll share this with you. Like, sometimes writing is more an automatic thing than we realize. That's something I talked about again, that they say you're supposed to write 1,000,000 words first, basically, because then it takes that long to stop writing everything autobiographically. Every niche helps you pull out new stuff from work. Yeah, actually, that's synthesis of knowledge is one of the. Some people are better than that than others. We kind of learned from my little group of classmates that some people just had strengths in certain fields of analysis, and synthesis of knowledge is one of them. To pull from every discipline you're interested in. You can hear this is scratchy, but I don't have the thing with me to reset it. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I didn't enjoy having someone tell my interpretations were wrong. Um, in order for their, I guess, to go backwards. Uh, I want to go on a story tangent. Yeah, I'll go back to it. It's not that there's not that great a story. It's just the example always reach you for in talking about how personal an element of a story can be. I'll come back to that. Hold on. Talking about, in order for your interpretation to be wrong, okay, for that to be the wrong read, doesn't that necessitate that there is a right interpretation? Certainly more interpretations, certainly some interpretations make more sense to other people, and certain explanations for why you've arrived at that will ring more true for other people. But that subjective judgment is just like the subjective experience of experiencing a piece of art yourself, right? Yeah, so I mean the two go together. If there's not a wrong interpretation, if my interpretation is valid, even if it's inaccurate, the same thing holds. That your interpretation, even the most popular interpretation, can't be the right one. Like both of them can't exist, right? And yeah, I think people read themselves into art. Um, the things that resonate for you, the ways you're able to make empathetic connections or not, isn't a judgment against you. It just says something about who you are in the moment. If you've ever watched something years apart, and I know some of you have made this comment about Evangelion, you are a different person from the time you watched it the first time to now, and so your experience of it is different. Which of those experiences is right? Right? The fact that you changed, you yourself were the same person, now experience it differently. That is replayed as many times as there are people who experience an art piece of art, right? You know, every time you read a book, it's different because you're different, right? Yeah, you're late. We're gonna wrap up here pretty soon. I think we've gotten away from actually talking about Evangelion. So yeah, so things are a little more intangible, and when you are doing analysis, right? There's definitely a difference between a teacher who's trying to teach you the normal way that that discipline is applied. For example, there are schools of literary criticism, like feminist criticism, Marxist criticism, new criticism, post structuralist criticism. Those actually do have kind of definable approaches, not objective ways that work should be done, but a kind of objective way that you should apply that discipline to a work. So when you're talking about in the school situation, there actually are like wrong ways to have gone about an analysis, not necessarily the wrong way you interpreted it, right? Like if you're supposed to be using a particular style of interpretation and you don't, then that kind of becomes wrong. Yeah, this is an interesting one. There's a there's some sort of widget I can add down here that'll actually tell you what's playing, but yeah. But I will say one of the things that was very useful for the alter ego schooling, and Theta has inherited it, is having to learn how to apply one of these, apply an analysis tool that I didn't come up with myself, and to do it regardless of how I felt about the work, whether I liked it or hated it. And you couldn't betray how you felt about it. You couldn't make judgment in your work. And that's unpleasant at times, but it teaches a pretty useful skill set, I think. It's the song. I have no idea what's going on. Hold on. This is like the chill mix, too, I meant for. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with it, but it was kind of distracting whenever I would pause, right? Yeah, so like, for example, talked about this a little bit, but is psychoanalysis is something that psychologists don't do anymore, haven't for a long time, but the literary world picked that up and thought that's actually an interesting way to um, that's an interesting way to try to figure out how characters work, or try to pull the author's mark on their work out of it, right? So that's now like literary people have like run rampant with that almost a century after no one else in the scientific community pays any heed. So yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I'll have time is sorting out the music situation. I'm just we signed up for Presso Radio, so I could play stuff that I know I can just pop right back on YouTube and be fine. Haven't told the story yet. Yeah, so this is not like some earth-shattering story, but it always makes me think of how a story is different from each person. So okay, I'll just share this. This is not some amazing story, but since I did mention it, so the story is what I think of when I think about how personal the experience of an art piece is, and how it can't necessarily be replicated for someone else. And this is a guy my alter ego worked with for a few years, and we were talking about the Beauty and the Beast live action movie. Okay. And one of the things that happened in that story, or in that adaptation, is they changed some of the music, and they added some things. They added some new songs, and then some of the songs they kept, they just altered a little bit. And he was very upset about them altering the Gaston song, if you know what I'm talking about. And the reason I was like, I kind of like that they did something different. It wasn't just a shot-for-shot remake. But what he eventually admits to me is that when he was a kid, that song and the way Gaston like bares his chest and all this, that was the moment he realized he was into guys. Right? That was the moment he realized that he was gay. And so that forever sticks out his mind as like this key moment in his life in that work. And so it'll never mean that to me. Never. Like, I can't. But how can I get upset at him finding that missing from the new adaptation, right? And so it'll never mean that to me, right? I have a few moments in storytelling that were particularly meaning to me, but like not like that, right? And this guy rarely shares that kind of thing about himself. So it's kind of like that was the importance of that story, that moment in that story to him is something that wouldn't even occur to me, right? That could really change. But as I look at my own relationship to art and pieces and how they've affected me at different points, I realize that like I have a dozen or so of those, and I imagine a lot of people do. And so who is to stand in judgment of the validity of which of those experiences is more important than others? So yeah, the theta lore. I mean, it's I'm sharing. You don't know the guy and whatever, so but I'm a little squirrely about sharing it in that context. But it's something that, of all the reasons to be upset about the remake, that is not one that would have occurred to me. So who would not be into Gaston, right? As far as the remake goes, like, I don't know, man. Gaston's performance in the remake might be good enough to show up for. So, and LeFou, the way they do LeFou instead, and like that might be enough just to show up. Anyway, that's the story. That's the one I always think of when people are talking about how a piece of art might affect you. And yeah, you're right. That is why people get upset. Nostalgia is a strong force, right? You're welcome. I don't even know how good a story it is. That's the one that sticks out in my mind because it was so unexpected. Yeah, like with interpreting Evangelion. I mean, hey, look, we made it relevant again. How much the personal crises of these characters speaks to you really depends on where you are. In a much earlier discussion, we talked about Scum's Wish, that anime. Then I told you the alter ego has a friend who can't watch it because it's too real. It's too close to his own experience. So And this is, I don't think I've ever crapped on this in a public thing because I try to keep my crapping to a minimum. But I am I'm pretty annoyed at critics that for a while they're treated sentimental as a pejorative, right? That that if something has sentiment and invokes sentiment in the audience, that's automatically cheaper, that's automatically less. And the result of that was like a real trend for a while there. The result of that was we had this nonstop faucet of anti-heroes in response to being afraid of being called sentimental. Um, Whereas I'm sitting here thinking, like, isn't the human connection to a piece of art, like, maybe I've been confused all the time. Isn't that like one of the things about it? Like one of art's like calling cards. So nostalgia is cognitive dissonance. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and art speaks to you. We've gone philosophical again, but in this case, it's actually somewhat relevant since we've reached a very philosophical point in Evangelion. Um, I feel like art is just like language. This is an artifice we have stacked on top of our normal biological whatever. This is a way. So art is like language plus the things that we struggle to express in words or get out of our own subconscious. For a lot of people, art becomes that outlet. This becomes the way they communicate how they feel, that they couldn't. Another thing, just like trying to explain color to someone who's never seen, trying to explain a song to someone who's never heard, who's been deaf their whole life. Like, how would you do that with language? How would you try to explain and make them feel the same thing you feel when you know your experiences don't align, right? Anime is more. No, I mean, I feel like that's really common. One of the things that I was being probably unnecessarily judgmental at the anime community in an earlier one of these, but like one of the things I really like about the anime community is they're much, in general, they're much more willing to be honest of having emotional reactions to stories, to the things that happen to characters. So um, that's also like how anyway the way since moments like that, like my friend, um, can't be explained away and it was unexpected to him and you couldn't necessarily replicate that experience that he had on purpose. um, I think it just goes back to this whole idea that all these interpretations are equally valid. If it speaks to you, that says something about the piece of art and where you are at that moment. Both things, right? And if you're in a different place, maybe a piece doesn't speak to you like it did. Maybe it will years later. Maybe it would have years earlier. So, anyway. Yes, yeah. If you don't relate to the characters, if you can't create that empathetic bond, you no longer have a stake in what they're doing. To go back to TV tropes for a second, someone can grab that. Probably there's something they call eight deadly words. I think is what it is. I could be remembering, but it's basically like these are the eight words. I don't care what happens to these people. If that's how someone feels about a work, then it actually doesn't matter what else it's doing well, right? You're not invested in it, you don't care. And so if you can't relate to them for some reason, that does change, I think, the scope of what you get out of the story. Yeah, and talking about canon too. Are all versions valid in their own right? I think so. I actually hate the default behavior where people want to take an adaptation and immediately compare it to the original. Like, They can be their own thing. Comparative analysis is fine. It's a thing. It's certainly interesting, but that seems to be like the default thing. I liked this version better. How did this version do? It's interesting, but like the experiences are different. We wouldn't have multiple media if the experience was the same no matter what. Yeah, and yeah, so like our characters in Evangelion, some people connect to them really well. They really see their own struggles in these characters, and so it means something to them that it won't mean to someone who doesn't connect to them. And so all the rest, all the other song and dance becomes accessory, right? Yeah, people were invested in things in Evangelion that didn't get an answer in 25 and 26. And that lack of payoff for that investment informed how they reacted to the whole. Yeah, it's 5:30, 6:30, 6:30, 6:30. Yeah, that's right. This is about where I want to cut off. I said it would be an hour and a half, where it was an hour and a half originally. So, of course, at the very moment, we're talking about some great stuff. But you're welcome. I mean, I like this. Obviously, I like talking about works but partially because it's such a natural springboard into this other stuff that I think's really interesting. We are mostly talking about storytelling as an art, just because of the character. Since there are characters who are reacting to what's happening in the art, you have like the option to relate to the individuals in it rather than the whole. But I mean, even in like music, there will be a speaker, right? There will be or in the visual art, a certain perspective makes a difference. But then that's a little bit more personal. Like walking around a statue, different than a picture of it because someone else chose the angle, right? You're welcome. Should I just casually stream? One day that might make sense. For the moment, to talk about everything I want to. Yes, but yeah, one day it might make sense to just have a casual Sunday afternoon to talk about storytelling in general. But you are right that this is mostly talking about storytelling as art, not all art. So, sorry. It's been a long time since I played Minesweeper. It might be ugly. I could probably interpret. We could try to interpret the deeper meaning of a Minesweeper. That might be fun. So yeah, we could talk about it for days. Thank you guys. I'm glad. It didn't matter so much talking about Death True Squared, which seems like an unnecessary title. But yeah, just pop up the phone, go find a pool to lay by, and promptly cook to a crisp in this summer. Retrospective one day. I mean, I thought about doing that. I thought about doing that for a couple of works actually. But when all this is over, next week I'll talk about what I think is coming down the line. So the cooking spinoff. You just want to see me get back in the Soma cosplay. I'm on to you. There's a picture kicking around here somewhere, I'm sure. Yeah, with specifically storytelling. Yeah, music's a different thing entirely, because music, depending what you're talking about, can have characters in it, or there's a speaker if it's lyrical, but if it's purely instrumental, then that's a much more, how does it make you feel? And I gotta tell you, like, music's a hard thing to talk about. I actually asked a buddy of mine who's been a professional musician for a couple decades and is an anime fan, if he might want to come on here sometime and give a better expert opinion on that kind of thing. But no, you're getting little pieces of what I'm thinking of what might be fun to do in the future. But get me off my feet? I'll be on my feet. Actually, eat on my feet. The alter ego works on his feet, so most of the time. I'm sorry, Flying Seaman. This was not just try to invoke instrumentality, and it'll be fine. You'll have all the company you need. So, all right, I'm 2 minutes over. That's like a new Theta world record. So let us being a world unto yourself. Man, I feel like that's. I'm a big reader, and so that's actually kind of how I feel about it. Um, I used to say that maybe maybe other people read, but I submerge, right? I'm down, and the number of times I've read until birds are chirping is pretty. Yeah, I feel you. I'm also having trouble making complete sentences. It's often just really long run-on sentences with the theta cadence, where I put pauses in strange places. All right, thanks guys. This was like this was really enjoyable. This was different than I was expecting. So I'm gonna go immerse myself in End of Evangelion. Um, go yeah, you are talking about the egg. I will second the recommendation for the egg. That's another great. It's kind of relevant depending, and it's short, by the way. It's really short. You can read it in 5 minutes. So I would check it out. All right, thanks guys. Tomorrow at the normal single broadcast time, which is 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern, 7 Central European, 6 GMT, I believe. I think that's right. The thing below should tell you in your time zone, though, if I got it wrong. So it should be the last thing on there now. So bye, guys. Thanks for turning out for this. This was fun, and thank you. I appreciate it. Andy Wire, yeah, that's the one they're referring to. Very short. Correct for you? Okay. That one I can do more easily, except when we're in the gap when we're on different daylight savings. So you're welcome. You're welcome. I enjoy this. I mean, I get a lot out of this. So thanks for saying. I will have a breathtaking time. All right. So all of you who've never seen End of Evangelion or are going to watch it tonight, I would love to go back and be you and see it for the first time. So we'll pick that conversation up tomorrow. Night.